So, good evening, Africans. We have some problems that are not just unique to Africa. Yeah, these problems are unique to everything that we see around us, unique to every culture, unique to every country, unique to every tradition. What I'm speaking of is the problem of immigration. Every country has its own immigration problems, you know. That is why we have things such as passports, and that's why we have things such as visas. You know, on the flip side, visas have an advantage, and also on the flip side, passports have an advantage. In as much as we are looking for these borderless policies, I believe we should find a simpler means of allowing people to trade with one another, because immigration and having uncontrolled movement of people within countries can prove to sometimes be very, very problematic. You understand? Because when you open doors, you don't know who gets into the country. You don't know them clearly. And so there is some kind of background check that needs to be done. There is some kind of a system of filtration, you know, that has to be done. So why am I saying this? I'm saying this because right now in the US, Trump and his, you know, his puppets that he's pushing around to ensure that he reaches effective means by which he can remove all the undesired. Yeah, undesired is used in this video deliberately to refer to people with whom Trump refers to as, you know, unappreciated, unimportant, all those kind of adjective you might want to use, you know. So ICE is a department that Trump is using to ensure that he's cleaning up. And so we also have ICE in another name, you know. We have South Africa. Many times we always blame South Africa for being xenophobic. We blame South Africa for not wanting to accept Africans. But again, let's look on the flip side. Why is South Africa doing that? What would we do as, let's say I'm a Kenyan, what would my government do if we had such an influx of immigrants that some of these immigrants would bring negativity, would bring crime, would bring drug abuse, would, you know, commit all kind of vices in our country? What do you think we as Kenyans would do? After we know what we would do is now when we should start pointing fingers at South Africa. Sometimes a dark cloud has a silver lining. Not even sometimes, many times, every time. A dark cloud has a silver lining. Now, there's a South African white man who is really demonstrating what I'm telling you right now. He's speaking as a white South African. You know, he's there by naturalization. You know, these people are not born in South Africa. Their origin is not South Africa, but they have naturalized themselves. Their ancestors, their great ancestors, down, up to themselves. So they are citizens by naturalization and also by birth. But it first started by naturalization. He's explaining the problem of immigration. And I believe that we should look at this gentleman, listen to his perspective. Let's not judge, let's listen to him. And then I shall get back.
If our new Minister of Home Affairs, Leon Schreiber, has his way, then undocumented migrants into South Africa, whether they work in restaurants or in domestic environment or in civil society or roaming, will in fact be chucked out of the country. Now that's nationalism. That's not xenophobia. That is the minister saying, let us ensure that jobs are going to South Africans, and to legal migrants who are applying for asylum in South Africa, absolutely. Let us ensure that undocumented migrants coming into South Africa, for whatever reason, and we understand how pathetic their situation in their own country actually is, but we've got our own problems. Let us understand that those undocumented migrants coming into South Africa are taking South African jobs. The argument has always been that South Africans don't want to work at those jobs. They're not happy to be laborers any longer. They're not happy to work on gardens or be domestics or work in waiting positions in restaurants. But that's nonsense. The average South African who is under the age of 20 or 25 are looking for work, are hungry for work, are prepared to work, are productive, are educated, but remain unemployed, and principally because of those migrants coming into the country. Statistics South Africa would tell you a different story. They're telling you that, in fact, we don't have a problem with undocumented migrants in this country. They are a minority compared to the rest of the population. The real question is, who are they gathering their statistics from? Undocumented migrants are not going to answer surveys. They're not going to say, we're here illegally, and we're working, and we're making money, and we're sending that money back to Zimbabwe or Kenya or Ghana or wherever in Africa we've come from. They're not going to own up to that. They're not going to say it. When Statistics South Africa come knocking, those people are going to first disappear. So the bottom line is Stats South Africa do not know their you-know-what from their you-know-what. The bottom line is we have a migrant crisis. Ask our hospitals whether we have a migrant crisis. Ask our hospitals whether the medicine and the medical treatment are not going to people who in fact are not South Africans. Now, as Minister Schreiber issues this warning to undocumented migrants, irrespective of where they're coming from, there are a number of political parties who obviously are going to have to start shaking in their boots. Because the reality is they've depended on these undocumented migrants for votes, for support politically, sometimes even financially. Now, they're going to have to depend on South Africans voting for them. So watch this space. Either Leon Schreiber will be successful, or he will horribly fail, because the rest of the GNU will completely handicap him. Only time will tell. And the real other question is this: will law enforcement play the game? Given that there are particular segments of migrants who are responsible for major crime in this country, and we hear day after day, week after week, media reports. The last, by the way, being a whole group of Portuguese butchers who were in the country who had been kidnapped. Bottom line is, law and order in this country doesn't exist to the extent it should. It is not a center of excellence. And the question is whether the Minister of Police, who used to be our Minister of Water, will now in fact step up or not.
Research reveals that black leaders face many unique challenges that white leaders do not face. The first challenge is the constant scrutiny and pressure to perform, which can be overwhelming. Studies have shown that black leaders are often held to higher standards than their white counterparts, and when they fail, they are more likely to be blamed for the organization's failures. This scrutiny can lead to feelings of isolation and burnout. Additionally, black leaders often face what is known as the double bind, a situation where they are expected to adhere to both white and black cultural norms. This creates a challenge and balancing act where black leaders must navigate between two worlds while staying true to their own identities. Research suggests that this constant balancing act can be emotionally and mentally draining. Also, black leaders often face resistance from their peers and subordinates, who may be resistant to following their leadership. This resistance can stem from both conscious and unconscious biases, which can be difficult to address. A study conducted by the Center for Talent Innovation found that 64% of black professionals reported that they faced bias from their colleagues. Black leaders often face limited opportunities for advancement. This is due to a variety of factors, including the lack of diversity in leadership positions and the fact that black leaders are often pigeonholed into specific roles. A study conducted by the Center for American Progress found that only 10% of Fortune 500 CEOs are black. Black leaders often face the challenge of being perceived as a threat. This perception can be due to the unconscious biases that people hold, and it can be manifested in the form of microaggressions, such as being interrupted during meetings or having their ideas dismissed without consideration. A study conducted by the Harvard Business Review found that black professionals were 3.5 times more likely than their white counterparts to report experiencing racial bias in the workplace. Despite these challenges, many black leaders continue to make significant contributions to their organizations and communities. However, it is important to acknowledge the systemic racism that they face and work to address it. The challenges faced by black leaders due to systemic racism are numerous and significant, including constant scrutiny and pressure to perform, navigating the double bind, facing resistance from peer and subordinates, and limited opportunities for advancement, and being perceived as a threat. It is crucial that we recognize and work to address these challenges to create a more equitable and inclusive workplace.
Now, what do you think of this white man with his idea of, if so-and-so is elected and so people will be removed out? We have the importance of immigrants in a country. For instance, if you look at Uganda, Idi Amin took out all those Indians from Uganda. He chased them away. Yeah, he did such a good thing to some Ugandans, but again, it had some side effects. The side effect was this: the Ugandan economy fell. It dropped, it significantly dropped because the Indians were really supporting the private sector of economy. You see, that is an example of Uganda. Another example is the one which we found in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe, we had the president by then whose name was Robert Mugabe. He was so adamant, and it's as if he was having beef with these people. He decided to chase away all the white immigrants, the white settlers from Zimbabwe, and he took that land and he gave it back to the Africans. That is a good thing to do, considering that Africans didn't have land. He took the land and gave it back to the right owners. His methods may not be well, but you know what they say. They say that the end justifies the means. Do you believe the end justifies the means in this idea or in this situation? I don't know. But one thing I understand is this: as long as Africans, as long as we have borders, and these borders are strict in the context that the Berlin Conference left us with. They brought borders here and visas here, and now they leave us to live with it, but in their own countries, they don't have this. In America, USA is almost half of Africa. You can move in weeks from one end to another. In Europe, they move freely. They have what we call the Schengen visa. You can eat breakfast in Poland, have lunch in Hungary, have supper in Finland. That is what you can do. But in Africa, can you really do that? You can't. You can't. So if we remove that hardness and we put a simple filtration system that we are able to tell who and what is getting to our country, and we are able to make sure that our people are having their own means of employment, our people first, and then we work towards giving something to the immigrants. Because the problem of South Africans is the immigrant is getting what the South African should get. That is what they tell us. The immigrant is getting more jobs than the native South African. And that's a problem, because I believe charity begins at home. However, you can always share your thoughts on the comment section on what you think about this idea of border. A border is a good thing and it's also a bad thing. I think if we reach somewhere in the middle, we can get to a point of reason and we can able to think forward towards a more justifiable, equitable Africa. See you in the next one. This is EFK Original Documentaries. Let me know what you think.